Have you ever struggled to get your landscape photos evenly exposed, getting details in your highlights and your shadows? Well, in this video, I'll show you a few tips that I've learned to get that just right. The first thing you want to assess is the dynamic range of your image that you're taking. That means how much highlight you got and how many shadows you got. It's having a good understanding of the exposure triangle. Now, I did a video on that and I'll put the link above. But essentially is learning to understand to adjust your ISO, your aperture and your shutter speed, and they all work together to keep your exposure correct. And that will give you an idea what you need to do and what tools you need to actually get that nice even exposure. And a way to do that is using a histogram. That will tell you if you've got detail in your shadows and if you've got detail in your highlights, because you shouldn't really rely on the screen behind, because that does not give you a true representation of the image that you want. And I did do a video on a histogram too, so if you want to look at that, I'll put the link in the video above. But essentially all you need to do about the histogram is not clip the left hand side or the right hand side. That means the histogram doesn't push over to the left or the right. You keep everything away from the edges. And there's no true perfect pattern of a histogram because you have highlights and not so many dark shadows. That means everything will be pushed to the right hand side, but it doesn't mean it's overexposed. And again, you could say the same if you've got a lot of shadows in your image and you haven't got a lot of daylight, then it will be pushed to the left hand side. The key is it's not clipping the edges, each edge. But it is a key tool to get a nice even exposure throughout your image, and I'll show you that through the video. So additional to the histogram, then it's always good to have what we call a polarizer on the end of the lens. That helps calm down the highlights a little bit and brings out more detail throughout the dynamic range. And if the polarizer isn't enough, then you then can add an ND filter. That's called a neutral density filter. That helps calm the light down, and you have different grades and they go in stop values. So what I do is I put this ND filter, it's a square ND filter over the end of the lens, just to show you the difference it makes to the image when you pass that over. And then you can see the histogram now, you've got a massive spike to the left hand side. So this is my camera setup, and first of all I look at my meter, which is showing me I'm more or less in the centre, just a little bit to the highlight side, which I like to expose to the right a little bit more. That means putting a little bit more highlights and shadows in, because that helps bring the details out in the shadows, and it's called exposing to the right. As you can see on a histogram, it's not peaking at the right hand side, it's not peaking at the left hand side. So I've got details in my shadows and I've got details in my highlights, which I'm happy about that. So I've chosen f11 as my aperture because I want a wide depth of field. And then I've compensated that with my shutter speed. And then I've got my metering mode, and the metering mode is set to evaluated. That means it's evaluating the whole area of the image, not just one proportion of the image. You can use different metering modes for different situations. I have a video on metering itself, so I'll put the link in above. There's one other process you can do if you're really struggling to keep the balance throughout your image on one shot, and that's called exposure bracketing. And the way you do that is you take a series of 3 shots, and you can do that via your camera, and you can then sort of see, if you can see that now, and the bracketing here, I'm saying I want to take 1 shot, 2 stops under, a shot exposed, 2 stops above. Set that there, and then when you press your shutter, it will take 3 consecutive shots at the different exposures. Okay, so it's taking 3 different shots. And what you do then in post-processing, if you use Lightroom, then what you do is merge those photos together. And what the computer will do, and what Lightroom will do, is assess the tonal values of all 3 shots, merge them together to get a high dynamic range of your photo. If you're doing sunsets and the sun's in front of you and it's coming onto the lens, you have your ND filter and everything else, and that's still not good enough, then you can say you want exposure bracketing to actually use to actually balance out the dynamic range of your shot. So it's also important to use a tripod for your landscape photography, as this allows you to use a low ISO to control the grain effect into your photo, small aperture for your wide depth of field, and then therefore the flexibility to use a shutter speed to control your exposure. So for information about the polarizer and ND filter and tripod, I'll put the links in the description below. So let's dive into Lightroom, and I'll show you how to merge these 3 shots together to produce a single image with the best exposure Then we'll fine tune that to produce a fantastic landscape photo. So the first things we want to do is locate the 3 photos we took at different exposures. And I found them here, 29, 30 and 31. And I've got an Apple computer, so therefore I use Command. I think it's Alt with the Microsoft, but you just have to check. So click on, right click there, photo merge, HDR. It'll work its magic and it's come up with the image and I'm happy with that. So then I just click merge and it'll work its magic. Okay, so it's found its results there, so I just click on that. And now here we are, we have a nice evenly exposed image, but I just want to fine tune it now to put some more drama in the clouds and then punch up the colours in the land. So first things first, I'll use the tone curve, which is a real powerful tool. I like using this, and I'll just find an area where the higher tones there, and then some darker tones there, and you can see now you can really get some detail there, which I quite like. I go into the reds, find the same, higher tones there, and slightly lower tones there. Go into the blue at the green tone, and then back again. You can see this starting to come to life and get a little bit more detail. It's a really good tool to use. Bring it up a little bit there, and just find an area there to come down. So I'm happy with that. Now what I'll do is use this masking tool and choose sky. It's a real powerful tool and it really does accurately highlight the sky only. So I just want to start to adjust the texture in here. I don't really need to do anything else. So I really want to punch it out to make some real drama in the clouds. So, and then the dehaze is a real good tool, because you can see now, get some darkness in there. And you see, it all depends how you want to interpret it all depends how you want to interpret the image yourself and what story you want to put into it. So the next, choose sky again, and then you can invert it. And it will highlight and mask the land, and then you can do what you need to do in the land. So I just want to bring up the shadows a little bit more, brighten that up, just tone down the highlights a little bit, and the whites. You can see what's happening just up there, just a tad. Tickle this saturation a little bit more, bring the texture up, a little bit of clarity, and that's it. So now I go into the overhaul. So now I'll start adjusting the texture throughout the image and the clarity, just to bring it to life a little more. You can see the tone, the histogram is nicely bunched up along the tonal values, but nothing clipping the edges, and that's nice. I like that. Just a little bit of dehaze. You can see now this whole image has come alive, and I like this. So this is as far as I want to go with this image now. There is the colour grading here, but I won't get involved in that. That's another topic all on its own. So thanks for watching this video. If you found it useful, hit that like button, and also consider subscribing for more content like this. Also, don't forget to leave a comment down below, as I do value your feedback and it allows me to create better content in the future. And if you want to see more videos like this, be sure to click the notification bell so you don't miss future uploads. You take care and have a really good week.